Anne and Riley plummeted alongside Pemblewink through the portal he had conjured, surrounded by swirling ethereal lights that danced and shifted in mesmerizing patterns. Sometimes they thought they could see their memories displaying their past, like a floating television screen. The air around them hummed with a melodic resonance as they descended into the unknown. As they fell, a flashing of colors enveloped them, creating a surreal dreamscape. The sensation was both exhilarating and disorienting. The pull of gravity seemed to shift and warp, making their stomachs flutter. Anne's hair billowed around her like a vibrant comet tail, while Riley tried to grasp at the ephemeral lights, fingers passing through them like water. Abruptly, the portal spat them out into a two-sun skyline that mirrored its own reflection like rippling water. Wisps of fluid clouds painted the horizon in a pastel tint, and the air carried a faint scent of unfamiliar flora like sweets. In a sudden rush of wind, they are twisting through upwinds with force fields that cut against their skin. A distant faint sound of screaming rang out, getting closer towards a sea of interested faces, now looking up towards the skies, bewildered by the strange audio-like surround sound. Their descent led them to come face to face with a cobblestone road with its uneven paving. Riley, glancing slightly upward, noticed a row of shoes neatly aligned at eye level. Each pair gleamed with a glistening sheen, and the rhythmic clattering echoed under the wind. The boots seemed to move around in all directions, creating an illusion of a spectral procession along the road. As Anne and Riley observed the many feet passing them by, they realized that Pemblewink was nowhere to be seen. Searching aimlessly all around them, yet neither of them could find him. In the deepest regions of the night, amidst the enchanting chaos, Pemblewink, unnoticed, slinked away into the solitude and shadow of a nearby alleyway, disappearing down a quiet back road, leaving Anne and Riley to completely fend for themselves. While Pemblewink navigated through the dimness, he accidentally drops a small object that he was toying with to comfort his nerves. Unable to see clearly through the dense fog that moved softly like waves of the sea, down the narrow path he felt his fur standing on end as if he was being watched. He traced his steps carefully, holding onto a nearby rocky wall, bending over to retrieve the object, yet it gets forcefully dragged away into the depths of the shadows before him. With bated breath, his paw clutching onto his chest, he gulps slightly and finds the courage to trace the darkness upward, searching for what was inside. In the dimly lit alleyway, shadows clung to the walls like secrets, and an air of enigma thickened the atmosphere. As Pemblewink advanced cautiously, a hooded figure emerged, a nebulous silhouette, neither man nor spirit, its essence shrouded in the unknown. The figure, draped in a long, spectral cloak, extended an ethereal hand, as if conjuring the very essence of mystery itself. From within the folds, a vial-shaped object materialized, glinting ominously in the scarce light. With a calculated gesture, the figure tossed it across the back of its fingers, a silent dance of clandestine dealings. "Pemblewink!" The figure's vocals cords are strained and forced, the words hanging in the air like husky truths. Pemblewink's gaze met the hooded enigma, a mix of recognition and trepidation in his eyes. Their exchange of words unfolded like a cryptic dance, each sentence revealing only fragments of a hidden narrative that bound them in the dark alliance. In the dance of shadows and whispers, the figure spoke in riddles, and Pemblewink responded in whispers and echoes. The vial, a conduit of secrets, symbolized the delicate balance of power in their dark world. As the dialogue wove its web of intrigue, the alleyway remained a stage for their obscured alliance, veiled in the mystique of the unknown. The ever-elusive companion that Anne and Riley thought they had seemed to know now merged seamlessly into the shadows as the figure and Pemblewink continued side by side down the alleyway, leaving behind the now very vulnerable twins. Although for Anne and Riley, their attention was certainly focused on the here and now. One particular pair of boots stood out against the rest. Among the row of different shoes, one pair stood out conspicuously. Vibrant hues of iridescent violet and royal blue adorned the leather, creating a mesmerizing play of colors that captured Anne and Riley's attention. The shoes seemed to shimmer with an inherent magic, reflecting the essence of this person's personality. Each step, even in the stillness, sets off tiny ripples of energy, adding an ethereal pulse to the immediate surroundings. As Anne and Riley levitated slightly off the ground, their gaze fixed upon these extraordinary shoes, the air buzzed with an unspoken intrigue. The distinguished lady who wore them materialized before them through the crowd, an embodiment of elegance and mystery. Her attire echoed the fantastical, with flowing robes of purple that seemed to mimic the movement of constellations. The lady stood in all her grace, but the body language said she was displeased, tapping one of her unique shoes against the cobblestone road, the sound resonating like thumps to the beat of a drum. Her eyes, pools from out of the light blue sea, met Anne and Riley's with a knowing, stern stare. The weathered older lady, adorned in an ensemble befitting the magical realm, presented an air of regal sophistication that transcended earthly elegance. Her long silver hair was meticulously curled into an intricate updo, adding a touch of timeless grace. Atop her head sat a whimsical purple hat, adorned with feathers that seemed to giggle at them as they float in mid-air. Her attire, a cascade of flowing fabrics and jeweled trinkets, hinted at the depth of her magical knowledge. With eyes that sparkled with wisdom, she addressed Riley and Anne in a voice that resonated with both authority and a hint of benevolence. Her words carried the weight of experiences beyond the ordinary, each syllable wrapped in an unseen mystique. Despite the sternness, there was an undeniable warmth in her gaze, a testament to the compassion that tempered her regal demeanor. Commanding them to follow, the lady tapped the bottom of her scepter on the cobblestone road with a firmness that echoed through the air. In response, Anne and Riley, who had been suspended in their levitated state, fell harshly onto their front. They wince in pain, hitting the sharpness of the path. As they both looked up toward her, she smirked down at them, and then, as she spun her torso fast, the rest of her body followed, and she hastily started to walk away. Mrs. Perifold led them past a row of quaint shops, adorned with intricate signboards. The air was redolent with the fragrance of exotic herbs from the apothecary, which had just closed its wooden door, and the lingering scent of freshly baked pastries wafted from the bakery, where the last few loaves were being carefully arranged on display. Anne had to double-take as she noticed one loaf twisting itself into a delicate pattern before her eyes. As the trio ambled further, the enchanting glow of luminescent crystals spilled onto the floor from the jeweler's workshop, casting prismatic reflections on the surrounding facades. While the shop owner swore and gathered them up, he gave a tilt of his hat to them as they walked on by. A soft melody emanated from the musical instrument shop, where an artisan delicately tuned an otherworldly harp, where the strings glowed a different color depending on the tune played. The rhythm of their footsteps harmonized with the distant notes, creating a serenade that resonated through the village square. In the fading twilight, the storefronts transformed into miniature galleries, showcasing magical artifacts. Anne and Riley couldn't help but peer through the windows, their eyes drawn to shimmering talismans, bewitched trinkets, and ethereal paintings that seemed to stir with life. A clockwork automaton, meticulously crafted, performed a captivating dance in one display, while a crystal ball in another seemed to hint at untold secrets. The gentle breeze carried with it snippets of hushed conversations as shopkeepers conversed about the day's events, their laughter harmonizing with the soft babble of a nearby fountain. The vibrant tapestry of the village unfolded, inviting Anne and Riley to explore its mystical wonders. As the shops began to close for the night, shutters creaked softly and magical lanterns flickered to life, casting a warm and comforting atmosphere. Anne and Riley couldn't help but feel a sense of belonging, surrounded by the beauty of the market village, each step revealing a new facet of its captivating charm. Magical stalls lined the bustling streets, each one a treasure trove of wonders. The market's heartbeat was the hustle and bustle of merchants packing away their enchanting wares. As Anne and Riley walked, they caught glimpses of shimmering crystals, ornate spellbooks, and mysterious artifacts that seemed to fly around the tabletops. A potion vendor, her face obscured by the hood of her cloak, carefully packed vials of iridescent liquids, their colors reflecting the glow of the lanterns. Beside her, a jeweler delicately placed enchanted amulets into velvet-lined cases, their gemstones winking with arcane brilliance. Further along, a tent housed a fortune-teller who, with a deck of shimmering cards, predicted destinies for eager patrons. The cards grew in size when picked from the deck, revealing themselves to those who needed them most. The aroma of exotic spices wafted from a spice merchant's stall, where bags of enchanted herbs and rare ingredients were neatly arranged. Patrons haggled with the intensity of seasoned negotiators, their voices weaving into a symphony of magical exchanges. The air buzzed with the energy of the market, and the rhythmic clinking of coins blended with the occasional burst of laughter. Mrs. Perifold led the way through this enchanting labyrinth, her pace unwavering amidst the vibrant conversations of the night market. As the trio moved forward, the merchants closed their stalls, folding enchanted fabrics and securing precious items in lockboxes adorned with protective enchantments. The market, once a vibrant hub of magical commerce, turns to a more solemn place. Mrs. Perifold, walking with intent, speaks with authority. "Why am I not surprised that you'd both be covered head to toe in dirt? Well, I guess I will have to find a way to clean you both up before people start to talk. I own the orphanage just around the corner from here. You could scrub all that muck off there." Anne huffed with a long groan. "Are you serious? We have no idea where we are. We don't know you. We're pretty freaked out, actually. To be honest, I just want to rest." Mrs. Perifold tuts. "Remember, dear girl, you're the one following me, not the other way around. Pemblewink always manages to connect with me magically in order to throw his little leftovers at me." Riley explained aloud, "He's not exactly our favorite person right now either." Anne, in a curious tone, "And where's Pemblewink?" Mrs. Perifold stops dead in her tracks, turning on her heels, and lets out a little laugh. "Pemblewink has vanished. Any signs of anything out of his comfort zone, and he's nowhere to be seen." Riley is still frustrated and feels betrayed. "Wait, he's left us here? Alone?" Mrs. Perifold, with a heartless response. "All he wants is power and trinkets. He's forever a law unto himself." Riley inquiring, "Mrs. Perifold, so what exactly does Pemblewink know about us exactly?" Her eyes start to glaze over from all the questions. Pemblewink is a creature of mischief and unpredictability. His knowledge is vast, of course, yet his true motivations remain shrouded by his own self-importance. Trusting him is akin to dancing on the edge of a cliff. Anne, with a hint of doubt, "Surely he cannot be all bad, can he? He wouldn't go as far as protecting us yesterday if that was the truth." Mrs. Perifold starts a laugh, more with sarcasm. "You must realize that everyone may have their own agenda, dear girl. You are in a place you cannot control, with only tiny threads of truth for you to hold on to so far. His involvement may lead you astray, for he is bound by his nature, and his allegiance is fickle. Riley, feeling let down and ashamed to be so easily led, looks to Anne, who knows that he's extremely disappointed in her trusting him so readily. So, we can't trust him then. Mrs. Perifold, in her cold tone, turns away from them both and just continues walking forward. Trust him to be himself, my dears, a mischievous guide with knowledge entwined with nothing short of lies. By all means gamble with your own lives, but with others you meet, that is a gamble with consequences you may not be willing to bear. As this poised lady spoke, the weight of her words settled upon Anne and Riley, a realization that the whimsical guide they had followed might have led them into a web of uncertainties. The night market, once a place of enchantment, now felt tinged with shadows as they grappled with the revelation that their journey might be more than bargained for. Fixing her gaze on a small, seemingly inconspicuous cottage nestled on the outskirts of the market town. In a voice that resonated with an foreboding power, she spoke words that wove through the air like a spell. Mrs. Perifold reaches her slender yet rough fingers into her cloak pocket, pulls out a long, thin wooden wand encrusted with finest jewels against a mauve-painted oak base. "Metapherium!" she chanted loudly, extending the wand outwards. As her words hung in the air, a ripple of magic coursed through the scene. The quaint cottage, with its thatched roof and weathered exterior, began to shift and morph. Time-worn wood contorted, and the thatch gave way to ornate slate shingles. The structure expanded and transformed, revealing a vast and ominous building that now stood in place of the humble cottage. Anne and Riley passed through the imposing cast-iron gate, its hinges creaking with an echo that seemed to resonate through the quiet, winding roads. The path leading to the mansion was lined with overgrown hedges, their twisted branches creating a whimsical yet eerie border. As they walked, the path meandered beneath the shadow of ancient trees, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Approaching the grand oak door, they marveled at the craftsmanship that adorned the exterior of the mansion. The Victorian architecture bore intricate details, with ornate carvings adorning the stone walls. Gargoyles with stoic expressions jutted out from the corners, watching over the path with a silent intensity. The door itself, a masterpiece of craftsmanship, loomed before them. Its surface was polished to a deep mahogany sheen, and in the center, a raven head served as the knocker. The raven's beady eyes seemed to follow their every move, and its sharp beak clutched a wrought iron ring that hung suspended in the air. The entryway was framed by columns adorned with swirling patterns, each telling a tale of the mansion's storied past. Vines of ivy clung to the walls, adding a touch of untamed nature to the imposing structure. The mansion, though aged, exuded a regal charm that transcended time. As Anne and Riley stood before the oak door, the mansion's exterior unfolded like a visual symphony, a testament to the craftsmanship and enchantment that had shaped its very essence. The air around them carried whispers of forgotten tales, inviting them to step further into the mysterious depths that awaited beyond the threshold. The old mahogany oak door groaned as it slowly swung open, revealing the secrets hidden within the mansion. The hinges creaked in protest, echoing through the grand foyer that lay beyond. Before Anne and Riley, a winding staircase descended gracefully, its banisters with delicate carvings that hinted at a forgotten elegance. As they stepped over the threshold, the flickering candlelight revealed a foyer frozen in time. The walls, once lined with opulent tapestries, now bore the marks of age, their colors muted by the passage of years. Cobwebs on the corners of every nook and cranny like ethereal lace, and a fine layer of dust cloaked the once polished surfaces. The flooring, a mosaic of intricate patterns, whispered tales of grandeur beneath layers of neglect. Anne and Riley, cautious in their steps, felt the coolness of the aged stones beneath their feet. Mrs. Perifold's heels rang out, each step a resonant echo that cut through the stillness, underscoring the timeless aura of the mansion. The door behind them closed with a slow, deliberate motion, as if sealing them within the mansion's enigmatic embrace. In the dim candlelight, a whispering candelabra on the wall seemed to come to life. Its flickering flames grew taller as if in conversation, and a soft voice, like the rustling of ancient pages, spoke to Anne. A fiery ember scorched Anne's cheek as the candle rested in the bronze holder and spoke, "Welcome, welcome, we heard all about you too. Mrs. Perifold extends her invitation. Don't be shy, ascend the staircase and go to your rooms. The other children have made your beds. Enjoy your stay at Perifold's Orphanage of Lost Magica." The ethereal invitation lingered in the air, and Anne and Riley found themselves drawn further into the mysteries that awaited beneath the mansion's aged grandeur. The flickering candles illuminated their path, casting shadows that danced with the house's excitement of their arrival. Mrs. Perifold, a stern yet diligent matron, navigates the low-lit corridors of her orphanage with practiced precision. The creaking floorboards betray her every step as she patrols the downstairs, an imposing figure in her austere uniform. Her sharp eyes dart from side to side, ever watchful for any signs of mischief or wrongdoing among the children under her care. As she strides through the common areas, her keen ears are attuned to the subtlest of sounds. She pauses intermittently, tilting her head slightly to catch snippets of whispered conversations or the rustle of clandestine activities. The silence of the orphanage is occasionally punctuated by the authoritative clap of her hands, a calculated display of confidence that sends a shiver down the spine of any misbehaving child. The grand staircase looms ahead, and Mrs. Perifold ascends it with a regal air. Just as Riley glances away, he is shook by a sharp, loud sound that rings throughout the building, her elegance shattered by an echoing clap. "What have I said about when the door opens and you hear its creaking? You are wanted on the stairs to greet newcomers. Hurry along. Where are all your manners?" Her words linger in Anne and Riley's ears. Mrs. Perifold's intense countenance softens ever so slightly as she acknowledges a fleeting but genuine warmth in her eyes. The orphans of all ages, in turn, respond with a chorus of pattering feet towards the stairs. The atmosphere, once charged with the tension of potential transgressions, transforms into a moment of communal unity. In this delicate balance between authority and care, as she maintains a vigilant watch over her domain, ensuring that order is maintained while fostering a semblance of familial connection among the children in her charge. Anne's eyes fixate on one particular orphan with flaming ginger locks that are swept over one eye, irises as green as a beautiful meadow with cheeky freckles on his cheeks. He moves his eyes her way to lock with hers and grins at her, which makes her feel the need to turn her back to him with embarrassment. Lost in the moment, the boy feels a harsh slap around the back of his luscious locks and looks up to find Mrs. Perifold's disapproving gaze, with lips turned slightly down as she looks past the top of her glasses toward him. "Ethan Thornweld, would you stand up straight, boy? You cannot walk properly if your knuckles are near down to the floor, for God's sake. Are you pretending to be an ape?" Her words shame him in a hurtful manner. His eyes dart down to the floor as he shakes his head. With a fleeting confidence, Ethan raises his head as his eyes meet with Mrs. Perifold's. He winks at her as a snake materializes from behind her back, slithering itself past the left side of her neck. As she looks across to the scaly skin of the creature, she grabs hold of the body of the serpent and clutches it as it morphs into a winged bird-like beast, which races towards Ethan's speckled pale face, bursting into flames, nearly burning off his already non-existent eyebrows. He stands there slightly quivering with a shaky bottom lip. Ethan's skin is black from soot, with his fiery hair up on end. Hearing the laughter of other heckling orphans, he retreats into a side room as Mrs. Perifold sighs loudly. "Would anyone else like to play games with me today, or are you all out of pranks?" Her words are clipped and have an air of arrogance. Anne observed with growing dismay as Mrs. Perifold, in her unyielding pursuit of order, seized upon the other orphans. The matron, clad in her no-nonsense demeanour, reprimanded those for engaging in what she deemed childish fun. The atmosphere in the room became charged with tension as Anne felt compelled to speak up, mustering the courage to challenge this authority figure. "Mrs. Perifold, he's just trying to have a bit of fun. Surely you used to do the same at his age," Anne implored, her voice carrying a note of defiance. She stood her ground, her eyes fixed on Ginny through the open door, who looked both grateful and surprised by Anne's intervention. The matron's gaze turned sharply toward Anne, a stern expression etched across her face. "Anne, there's no room for such frivolity. Orphans need to learn respect for the magic that surrounds them, not toy with it like common miscreants," Mrs. Perifold asserted, her words cutting through Anne's words. Undeterred, Anne retorted, "But he meant no harm. What's the worst that could happen? There's always a place for laughter." Her defiance, however, earned her a withering glance from Mrs. Perifold. "Laughter has its place, child, and it's not in undermining the rules that ensure discipline and respect for the magical forces that govern our lives. Had that snake bitten into my neck, I would be left in a dying state," Mrs. Perifold declared, her tone unyielding. With a dismissive wave of her hand, she effectively silenced Anne's protest, leaving the young girl grappling with a sense of frustration and the harsh reality of the matron's uncompromising principles. Riley cautiously approached the old oak door that Ethan had slipped through earlier, curiosity compelling him to peer through a discreet crack. As the door creaked open ever so slightly, a scene unfolded before him in the living room of the orphanage. Ethan Thornfield sat on an ornate ottoman chair, positioned by the tall, arched windows that bore ancient tales of times long gone. These strained glass drawings moved, telling stories of the fables of the past. The soft golden glow from candlelight played upon his short, fiery hair, casting a warm halo around his head. His complexion was fair, complete with a scattering of freckles that seemed to dance like little stars across his skin. Ethan's eyes, a captivating shade of hazel with flecks of gold, were fixed on the world outside. The windows framed him in a quiet tableau, and the intensity in his gaze hinted at a depth of contemplation. In the fading coming and going of light, the subtle play of emotions on his face revealed a mosaic of thoughts, a silent reflection of the dreams and yearnings that lingered within him. As Riley observed through the crack in the door, it became clear that Ethan was not merely staring into the distance. He was absorbing the tapestry of the outside world with a mixture of longing and curiosity. His fingers absent-mindedly traced patterns on the window pane, connecting him to a world that seemed just out of reach. It was a moment frozen in time, a snapshot of a young soul grappling with the mysteries of his past and the uncertainties of his future. Riley, caught in the thrill of espionage, misjudged the door's resistance and stumbled forward, unintentionally making a less than graceful entrance into the living space. The door groaned in protest, and Ethan's hazel eyes flicked from the window to the unexpected intruder. Ethan, caught off guard, arched an eyebrow as he got to his feet. He gets into a mage battle stance with his wand extended, his expression a mix of intent and mild amusement. "Well, well, looks like we have a daring intruder. Planning to steal my window-gazing spot, are we, Riley?" Riley, attempting to recover his composure, straightened up with an exaggerated swagger. "Your spot? Please, I was just passing through. Didn't realize this was your brooding corner. How do you know my name?" Ethan crossed his arms, a playful smirk playing on his lips. "Brooding corner, Thatchett. I prefer to call it the contemplation zone, and you just invaded it. We all get told the names of new arrivals. Apparently it's so then we are well informed before you arrive." Riley, feigning nonchalance, replied, "Contemplation zone, huh? Sounds like a place where you'd compose poetry or something for your non-existent girlfriend. Real tough, Thornfield." Ethan chuckled, his hazel eyes sparkling with amusement. "Tough? You have no idea. I once stared down one of the scariest creatures, and it blinked first. Wait a second. How did you know my name?" Riley raised an eyebrow, suppressing a grin. "Oh, I know everything. So you're real tough guy then. Try taming a stray cat in our world, then we will talk. By the way, your name is on your book by the window." Ethan's laughter bubbled forth, filling the room with a light-hearted energy. "Impressive. We should start a club, the Intimidators. Only for those with truly fearsome stares and back-chat." Riley, unable to hold back a laugh, joined in the banter. "Right, because the world trembles before our mighty gazes. We'll rule the orphanage with our not-so-intimidating presence." Ethan, with a theatrical flourish, gestured toward the ottoman chair. "Well, since you've disrupted the sanctity of the contemplation zone, might as well join me. We can scare away imaginary foes together." And so, in a swirl of comical banter, Riley and Ethan found themselves sharing laughter and forging an unexpected camaraderie amidst the presence of Mrs. Perifold's unwavering rules. Back within the foyer of the orphanage, with a flash Mrs. Perifold's gaze intensified as she fixated on Anne and Riley. Her ears began to ring as she sank slowly to the wooden floorboards, the weight of centuries pressing upon her eyes. In the hushed room, with prying eyes, the air seemed to thicken as she delved into the depths of a vision, unraveling the threads of a long-forgotten curse. The vision materialized like a deep and mind-bending mist, swirling like a cyclone in her mind. She saw Pemblewink, an enigmatic figure from the past, weaving deceptive tales to Anne and Riley, like a master puppeteer manipulating their perception. In this nightmare unfolding, the scene was alight with a spectral glow. Pemblewink's voice echoed, promising the twins that their world they left behind would be unchanged. But Mrs. Perifold discerned the treacherous undercurrent, a distorted reality awaiting them, a world altered by the passage of time and the low, distant voice barely audible. As the vision played out, she witnessed a line going between the twins, like a lightning bolt, striking through the fragments of the space between them, different colors enveloping Anne and Riley, its enchantments casting a spell on their senses. Pemblewink's words, dripping with deceit, resonated in the twins' ears, lulling them into a false sense of temporal security. Then, a pang of realization struck. The twins, innocent and unsuspecting, would soon confront a disconcerting truth. The world they knew might be a distant relic, distorted by the hands of destiny and the echoes of an ancient enmity. Her heart sank as she foresaw the profound disorientation that would grip Anne and Riley, the unsettling realization that the familiar had become unfamiliar, that time had played a merciless game with their memories. In that haunting moment of revelation, she understood the gravity of what Pemblewink's involvement was. All along, the cowardly creature had set his sights on what he wanted above all else. Yet the real question that kept replying back to her was whose voice she had heard. With a voice edged in urgency, Mrs. Perifold swiftly got to her feet as she hit away hands of orphans attempting to aid her. Grabbing onto Anne by the cuff of her collar, she ushered Anne from the bottom of the stairwell, her eyes reflecting the gravity of the situation. "Quickly, come with me," she implored, the urgency echoing in each syllable as they traversed the enchanted corridor. Mrs. Perifold throws open the creaky old oak door to reveal Riley and Ethan as they are laughing together by the window. "Already making friends, I see, Riley. You best be careful with who you allow into your circle. Choose very wisely who your friends will be here." Mrs. Perifold walks over to Riley, gesturing to him to follow her as she lightly slaps Ethan round the back of the head with her glove she removed specially. Mrs. Perifold's words hung in the air like a delicate charm, casting a subtle shift in the room's mood. The warm glow of the evening light seemed to dim as she cautioned Riley about the importance of choosing friends wisely in the magical world. Riley, absorbing her advice, met Mrs. Perifold's gaze with a thoughtful expression, the weight of her words settling in. The camaraderie he had shared with Ethan in laughter and banter now felt tinged with a newfound awareness. As Mrs. Perifold excused herself from the room, a brief silence enveloped the space, broken only by the faint whispers of the evening breeze outside. Ethan, observing Riley's contemplative demeanor, leaned against the window frame, hazel eyes fixed on his newfound acquaintance. "So, Riley," Ethan began, breaking the quiet tension, "what's the verdict? Am I so bad? Or should I start practicing my intimidating glare again without you?" Riley, caught between the gravity of Mrs. Perifold's words and the camaraderie he had shared with Ethan, offered a wry smile. "You might need to work on your attitude, but your intimidating glare is top-notch." Ethan chuckled, but his eyes reflected a hint of curiosity. "On a serious note, though, what did she mean about choosing friends wisely? It's not like I was going to do a hex against you, for God's sake." Riley sighed, a shadow passing over his face. "It's not just about spells and potions, Ethan. There's more to navigate here, alliances and rivalries we might not understand yet. Mrs. Perifold wants us to be careful about who we trust." Ethan nodded, a solemn expression replacing his playful demeanor. "Guess we're in for more than just magical lessons then, as usual." Just as the conversation delved into the nuances of their new reality, Mrs. Perifold returned, her gaze falling upon the two boys. "Riley, it's time for you to leave the room, please. Come along. You, Ethan, should be getting ready for bed." Ethan shot Riley a knowing look, his voice carrying a teasing note. "Looks like the contemplation zone will have to wait until tomorrow. Don't let the imaginary foes win without me, okay?" Riley grinned, rising from his seat. "I promise we'll scare them away together. Until then, keep perfecting that intimidating glare." As Riley exited the room, the door closing behind him, a sense of uncertainty lingered, both in the advice of Mrs. Perifold, an unspoken connection that had formed between Riley and Ethan in the magical world they were just beginning to unravel. As they walked, the corridor seemed to twist and shift, a surreal dance of magical dimensions. Mrs. Perifold glanced at the twins, determination etched on her face. "There's something you must know," she began, her tone carrying the weight of a revelation about to unfold. Arriving at a door that was fit for a mouse, Mrs. Perifold's body began to tremble as she knelt down towards it. The door, however, defied its modest appearance, expanding to accommodate them, a gateway into the mystical recesses of her office space. It was as if reality itself bent due to the nature of the truth she was about to unveil. Once inside, Mrs. Perifold turned to the twins, her expression a mix of sorrow and responsibility. "Pemblewink lied to you," she declared, the words hanging in the air with an ominous weight. "Time in the non-magical world is like a runaway carriage. The longer you're away, the faster it speeds up. What may feel like minutes here could mean years there." Her eyes locked onto theirs, a tremble in her bottom lip, eyes welling up with both fear and guilt. The world you left behind has been hurtling forward, changing with every passing moment. You must brace yourselves for a reality that may be vastly different from the one you remember. The truth lingered in the room like a ghostly presence. Anne and Riley couldn't speak and could only make little noises. Anne's eyes, once filled with such wonder for this new-found world, now betrayed a profound sorrow. She turned to Riley, her voice a fragile echo in the enchanted room. "Riley, what about Mum? How long has it been for her? What if we've missed so much?" Riley, caught in the grip of disbelief, searched Anne's eyes for anything other than sadness. Yet, what he found was an echo of the heartbreak etched on her face. "It can't be that long, Anne. This is some magical trick. Mrs. Perifold, tell us it's not true. Mum can't have aged that much." Mrs. Perifold, usually a source of wisdom, hesitated, her eyes glazing over with fear, which only confirmed the inevitable. "Time is a capricious force, my dear," she murmured, her tone grave. "I'm afraid the non-magical world may not be as you left it. The truth could be harsh, and we must prepare for the worst." Anne's shoulders sagged as her breaths quickened, her eyes darting around uncontrollably, the weight of the unknown pressing upon her. Riley, still clinging to hope, shook his head in disbelief. He moved on, over to the edge of the doorframe, having to lean on it to hold him up as he slid down it to the skirting board. Riley uses the sleeve of his jacket to wipe his tears and nose before lunging himself almost over Mrs. Perifold's desk as his anger boiled over, his voice cutting through the air like a storm. "This is all you're doing! Did you bring us both here? What do you think you gain from twisting our lives in with your magic? I demand you take us back right now. Undo whatever cursed trickery you've played." Mrs. Perifold, weathered by the weight of responsibility, met Riley's fury with a calm demeanor. "Riley, I understand your anger, but the magical realm operates beyond our control. I cannot reverse what has transpired. I never wanted to be involved in any of this, but I knew if Pemblewink was around, something was amiss." Riley's eyes flashed with a mix of sorrow and rage. "So it was him, wasn't it? It was him who did this to us? I won't accept losing everything because of him. We must get him to make this right." Anne, torn between loyalty and caution, stepped forward. "Riley, please. We don't know what consequences rushing back could bring. We need Mrs. Perifold's guidance." Riley turned slowly toward Anne, his anger now focused on her. "Guidance? She's trapped us in a world where time is a joke, and you're defending her? You're not my sister anymore if you can't see how wrong this is." Anne's eyes welled with tears, hurt by the betrayal in Riley's words. "Riley, don't say that. We need to think this through. Consider all of the risks." But Riley, consumed by his rage, turned away, storming himself out through the door as it slams behind his back. Riley stops for a brief moment, glancing over his shoulder before finding the strength to continue onward, leaving his sister behind. Anne was left motionless in the wake of his wounded words. The room was cold and heavy due to the fractured bond, the consequences of all she said taunting her. Mrs. Perifold eased herself onto the seat beside Anne, her movements deliberate and gentle. With a softness in her eyes, she began to unravel the tale of a forbidden curse that cast shadows across their magical realm. "It was all so very long ago," Mrs. Perifold started, her voice carrying the weight of ancient secrets. "There were two friends bound by a sacred blood ritual, sworn to protect each other for all eternity. However, the bond shattered when one betrayed the other to safeguard the love of his life." As Mrs. Perifold spoke, the gravity of the betrayal and the ensuing curse became palpable. The consequences were dire. The curse, fueled by the anguish of betrayal of the Crimson Witch, manifested through a potent form of telekinesis, spreading through the very bones of witches and wizards across the realm. All was lost for a long time, until the magic councils came together to weave a counteracting curse on her magic. She watched Anne's eyes widen with the realization of the profound magic that bound their world. This curse, Anne, is the reason for the twists and turns in our magical realm, the unpredictable nature of time. It is a haunting reminder of the delicate balance between loyalty and the temptations of the heart. In the soft glow of Mrs. Perifold's office, the ancient tale unfolded, weaving a narrative of friendship, betrayal, and the enduring repercussions that reached into the bones of those who dared to wield magic. Mrs. Perifold, her gaze steady, spoke with a sense of responsibility. Anne, you both are here because the kind of telekinesis magic that twisted our world was banned long ago due to her turning her back on everyone who helped her. Those responsible for following her were jailed for the crimes they committed against the balance of magic. Anne, eyes wide with realization, asked, "But why bring us into this now? Why not just leave us in the dark?" Mrs. Perifold sighed, a weighty acknowledgement in her words. "I had to, because the visions I saw were reminiscent of the moments when the curse struck. Your presence, the echoes of their betrayal, sent tremors through the magical fabric. I couldn't risk history repeating itself without you knowing the truth." Anne, still brimming with frustration, demanded, "So what do we do now? How do we stop this curse?" Mrs. Perifold's expression grew somber. "Stopping this curse is no simple task. It requires unraveling the ancient magic woven into our world by a witch that was so powerful we dare not speak her name. But rest assured, we'll face this challenge together. Knowledge is our most potent ally in the fight against her. That, I believe, is our only hope if she has returned." In a moment of sudden realization, the elegant and poised lady stood up from her seat, grabbing hold on Anne by the arm. She weaves an enchantment that unlocks the door before them, as Anne tries to protest and get away from the harsh grasp around her upper arm. Mrs. Perifold and Anne strode purposefully out of the enchanted office, their steps synchronized like a well-rehearsed dance. As they exited, the door, seemingly alive with magic, smoothly transformed itself into a diminutive entrance fit for a mouse, shrinking with a graceful fluidity. The corridor ahead unfolded like an elaborate puzzle, twisting and turning with mesmerizing intricacy. Yet, beneath their confident steps, the floor remained steadfast and unchanged, a testament to the power that Mrs. Perifold can wield. The air hummed with a subtle energy, as if the very walls were whispering secrets to those who knew how to listen. Mrs. Perifold's eyes glinted with determination, and Anne, with a mixture of awe and anticipation, followed her lead. The ambient glow from enchanted sconces played upon their faces, casting shadows that danced in harmony with their purposeful strides. Each corner turned revealed a new enchanting vista, as the enchantment wove a tapestry of mystery around them. The air was imbued with an otherworldly fragrance, a scent that hinted at the secrets concealed within the hidden recesses of the enchanted office. As they navigated the labyrinthine twists, Mrs. Perifold and Anne appeared before Riley, and as he didn't expect their presence, he was caught off guard. He yelped and held his chest before finding the strength in him to grit his teeth and shout towards them both. Yet it fell on deaf ears as Mrs. Perifold placed a hand with great force on his right shoulder. He looks down at it for a brief moment, then gets whisked away by an unseen wind. In an unexpected twist of fate, Mrs. Perifold's demeanor abruptly shifted. Beside Anne, her hand shot out with an iron grip, seizing Riley by the arm through the pitch-black, haunting emptiness. The air crackled with a sudden surge of magic as Mrs. Perifold invoked an ancient incantation, compelling Riley against their will. Anne, caught between astonishment and concern, witnessed the unfolding events with wide eyes. As Mrs. Perifold chanted under her breath, a swirling vortex of temporal energy enveloped the trio, distorting reality itself. The world around them blurred and contorted, colors melding into a surreal kaleidoscope as they were forcibly pulled into the unknown. Riley, unable to resist, felt the disorienting sensation of being torn from one reality and thrust into another. The time warp spat them out unceremoniously onto a familiar road, yet subtly altered. The air crackled with residual magic, and as they staggered to their feet, the realization dawned. Their home still stood, but it wasn't what they remembered. Riley's heart sank slightly as Anne took his hand into hers. He felt the need to squeeze onto it tight. Looking down at her, he nodded and reassured her everything was going to be okay. Mrs. Perifold, seemingly unfazed by the temporal upheaval, surveyed the scene with an air of purpose. Riley, bewildered and disoriented, struggled to comprehend the unforeseen journey they had undertaken. Anne, caught in the middle, exchanged a glance with Riley, a silent understanding passing between them in the midst of the temporal chaos that things had indeed changed, and that Pemblewink had been lying to them all along. The air tingled with the residue of time manipulation, and as Mrs. Perifold led the way toward the still-standing home, shadows of the past danced on the edges of the present. The house, a steadfast relic, held the secrets of all of their memories. As the trio approached the threshold of their displaced abode, an enigmatic chapter of their lives unfolded, one where the threads of time had been woven into an intricate void for the extraordinary. Mrs. Perifold extended her hand toward Riley, who still clutched Anne's hand in the aftermath of the time-warp disorientation. Her voice, a blend of authority and kindness, cut through the lingering echoes of temporal disturbance. "Riley," she began, her gaze steady and reassuring, "I am not your enemy. In this labyrinth of magic and madness, I offer you my hand to navigate the uncertainties that surround us all." Riley, torn between skepticism and the palpable sincerity in Mrs. Perifold's eyes, exchanged a hesitant glance with Anne. Anne, in turn, nodded with a subtle encouragement, recognizing the genuine intent in Mrs. Perifold's words. As the trio stood on the threshold of their displaced home, Riley slowly released Anne's hand and tentatively accepted Mrs. Perifold's outstretched hand. The connection was more than a physical gesture. It bridged the gap between uncertainty and the possibility of understanding. Mrs. Perifold continued, her words a soothing balm in the midst of chaos. "I seek to help you find a semblance of peace in this sad situation. The threads of fate have woven an intricate pattern around you two, and together we must unravel them." Riley, now holding Mrs. Perifold's hand, felt a peculiar mixture of vulnerability and newfound strength. In the face of the unknown, her assurance became a guiding beacon. With Anne by their side, the trio opened the once-white picket fence, now chipped and aged, as they heard nothing but their own footsteps lingering in their ears.